I'm Dean Deal.
And I'm Steve Hoskins.
And you're listening to This Is the Good Life, a podcast devoted to deciphering what it means to live as a Christian in this day and age.
And not just a Christian, but as philosophers, theologians, and maybe even decent golfers.
And a marketing guy.
Yeah, used to be a marketing guy.
Yeah, so speak for yourself. As two longtime college professors, we share a common goal to bring virtue and character back into the conversation of what it means to be Christian.
We'll do this by unpacking the thoughts of both our current culture and prominent philosophers like Aristotle, Kant, Descartes, and a guy called Jesus Christ.
You'll find that some pretty old thinkers had some pretty good ideas.
So join us for a conversation worth having about a life worth living.
After all, this is the good life. Well, here we are, Steve.
Season 4, baby.
Season 4.
Who ever thought we would get here?
My mom. And
we'd like to think the people that came over on the Mayflower.
Maybe so. They thought
in
we
the
would,
Conestoga wagons.
And here we are in season 4, and we are new and improved. You ever notice that nobody ever puts something out and
Let's
says...
just say we're improved.
I
don't know that we're new.
New and worse.
Yeah.
Like the new Chips Ahoy cookies are worse. But it's like now with less flavor.
Yeah.
That would... So... We're new in that here we are. We are on video.
We're on video.
This is what we look like.
And we have a YouTube channel, right?
We have a YouTube channel.
I have no idea what that means. I have been on the YouTube probably about as often as I've been on the Facebook.
The fact that you say the YouTube and the Facebook says it all. I don't think we need to enhance anything with that.
Okay.
But here's what we have to understand is we cannot release any of these episodes until they're all done, because if my wife finds out that we're doing these on video,
right,
then every time she hears I'm recording, you know what she's going to do. She's going to want to look at what I'm...
shine your forehead?
She's going to be like, those eyebrows...
Oh, yeah. Oh, my wife. Yeah, my wife
need
chases me around with
Yeah,
scissors.
I know.
Oh.
So, I don't need a stylist.
No.
So we just have to, all right, we're going to do these. It's going to be on video.
In secret.
And we're just going to drop them on it. Drop it on
I
her.
like
She's
that.
going to go, you were on... Why? Your collar was flipped up the whole time. And I'm like, but that's authentic.
Yeah,
we talked about how important it is
because
to
if
be
nothing
authentic.
else, you and I are authentic.
We
are nothing but ourselves.
We are authentic. So we're moving into season 4. The other thing I want to mention that's new and improved with season 4 is we have been embraced by the Hermitage Church of the Nazarene as part of their community and part of their ministry. And the Right Reverend Dr. Dr. Matthew Hastings has allowed us to come in, and we're recording here in their facility, which we're very grateful
very nice.
for.
It's
nice they have
it's kind of like we're
the
having
obligatory tree.
Yeah, it's almost like the Roosevelt era.
It's
speaking
fireside,
the fireside chat
we
room.
have everything we need but a fire. But that's what we're bringing the fire. We're bringing
and
the
now
fire.
we're Pentecostal.
And now we are. Woohoo! And we all know Nazarenes are just a hop, skipping away.
About that far.
We were this close.
Yeah.
This close. So as we move into season 4, the idea of season 4, we've been wanting to talk about the virtues, and now we want to talk about the practices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you have to. So there's something really cool. If you're keeping up with this at home, if you're keeping score as we go along.
If we're keeping score at home, it's about Steve 5 and Dean 0.
Well, yeah, okay.
Depending on what we're scoring.
How it depends on the Stableford scoring system, which always confuses me in the game of golf. But no,
you get a mulligan.
Yeah, we're at that place in talking about life in according to this idea of Christian virtue ethics.
Yes.
That, we've kind of talked about Christianity as its own language game, that, this exists for Christians as Christian practice. And it's not to exclude others, but it's to say this is what it means to believe and live as a Christian. It requires a certain way of seeing, a certain way of speaking, but very much a certain way of living. And beyond that, it's got to be situated in Christian narratives, in stories that God has told and revealed to us, the scriptures, but also in the way that the Holy Spirit has worked. And so now we're at the place where we can really do some conversation, some good thinking together about the fact that, in the way of thinking about life, and virtues, is that life is a socially, it's more than just constructed, socially contextualized, narrative in which Christian language, Christian ideas, Christian ways of being loving, forgiving, merciful, don't just take shape, but you can see them walking around.
Right.
And we're there. And so we
Yes.
want to talk about
We're
practice.
situated in the middle of a community with common practices
Yep.
that have been developed over time and that share a tradition. I read something, and here's something y'all need to know is every book I own in this stuff, the reason that we're so lockstep on all of this stuff is because he gives me books and makes me read them.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's what my teachers did to me, and
That's right.
And it's the particular sort of Nazarene torture,
But with the quote, and I think it was Dijkstra that said it, was that we don't just engage in practices, we are a practice. Christianity is a practice.
A practice.
And that means that we, when we go through this as socially embodied virtue, that we don't do it on our own.
No, not just don't.
We can't. We can't.
Because God's story is a story of the people.
That's right.
Of God.
That's right. Y'all.
Y'all.
And
plural.
sometimes all y'all.
All y'all.
If you
Air
go
one
from,
of y'all.
yeah,
Or as my grandmother said, everybody.
yeah. And as my mom said, "Use guys," until she lived down here long enough to learn y'all.
She from Chicago.
There's a Baltimore area.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, up in that area. I don't know if they say "use guys" or not. It
Yeah,
just
they
sounded
kinda
like
do.
they
Yeah, I
say
lived
something
not far from there
similar-
once. Yeah, no.
similar to that. But all
Happens.
y'all. And so, Christianity as a community practice, we call this season, if we had a title for the season, it would be a virtuous community, that the pursuit of ethics, the pursuit of character, the pursuit of virtue is not a solitary pursuit of self-improvement,
No.
but something that we enter into together. And the illustration that Dijkstra uses that I love so much is he talks about baseball.
Right.
Baseball is one of those games you cannot play baseball, although Bugs Bunny
Yes.
did.
Tried.
He won.
Yeah.
But he's
occasionally.
Bugs Bunny.
He's Bugs Bunny. Not exactly real.
No, but you cannot play baseball alone. The other thing I love about baseball as an illustration is that a community, a practice that involves a community, it's not just the people on the field that are part of the community of baseball or the tradition
Right.
or the practice of baseball.
It's the people in the
it's all of
stands
them.
yelling Cracker Jacks.
Everybody.
It's the scorekeeper.
That's exactly right.
It's the bat person, whether it's a bat boy or a bat girl, and they have both now.
And so to be part of a church and to be part of a virtuous community, there are no spectators. There are no people on the sidelines in the sense of, I go to church and these people put on this thing. It's something that I go to as an individual and walk away from because I get something from it or because it's what I needed this week. But that we are participating, even when we come in and we sit and we worship, we are participating. And then when we leave and depart, we haven't left the community.
No.
We are still participating in the
and-
practice.
And we're still, the practices like the paths of our lives, like the narratives that McIntyre talks about, all of our lives are multi-narrated.
Yes.
We're all part of many stories, M-A-N-Y.
Boy, don't even remind me.
I know. And
You start making the list of the stories that you're part of, and it can mess up your mind unless, as McIntyre talks about, there is a overarching narrative,
a meta-narrative.
a meta narrative.
And for us, that meta-narrative is Christianity.
That's right.
My being a Nazarene only makes sense within the meta-narrative of Christianity.
That's right. And what creates angst is when you have, and I've lived this in my life, and it's testimony time, but when you have one or more of those narratives that are inconsistent with what you have as a meta narrative, and that triggers all sorts
Or
of.
not just inconsistent, but conflicting with.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's hard. Redemption is hard in that sense. In my life, there's the great narrative of being a Southerner. I'm from here for many generations. My family lived the history of the South, no matter what anybody thinks of it, no matter all the flaws and sins. And the road to redemption can be really difficult.
Yes, it can.
You know, it can, and you live in that conflict. But the good news is there are practices.
Yes.
There is a telos, a purpose towards which we are being pushed and prodded and pulled, towards which grace is giving us the opportunity to travel toward.
And there are virtues and there are characteristics of the person that thrives in a virtuous community. And we're going to be in this season talking a lot about both the fact that those practices are individual and corporate, and moving from baseball. You know, I've talked before. I may have mentioned.
You may have
I
mentioned.
may have mentioned
Yes.
that I played the trumpet.
Occasionally.
Yeah, occasionally.
I remember
as
you
in-
playing it loudly.
I can still
It was
play it
right
loudly.
behind me
I can give you
in the jazz
I can
band.
give you 3 minutes of amazing, and then my lips
Still,
swells.
still give me 3 minutes.
Yeah, I give you
That's
3
about
minutes,
it.
and then the
we're
lip
done.
swells, and you get, and then I'm done. David's asked me, my brother's asked me to play in something later this year, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to get that stupid trumpet out.
How long
and
does it take to?
It'll take 3 to 4 weeks of playing just every night, play long tones and lip slurs for a bit, just
wow.
to get the lip built back up. That's why bass is so much better. I can pick up a bass and
Just fucking
play.
just do it.
Yeah, you just do it. The trumpet is a harder instrument. But when you play an instrument, there's not a lot of call for a trumpet player to play all by themselves. All the playing we do, unless you're playing taps.
Right.
Which
which
is-
which would be a really sad gig
It is a
if
sad
all you ever
gig.
did.
All you do
was
is
play
I'm the
taps.
taps guy.
Yeah.
So most of the playing that we do, and this is a good example because my brother's asking me to come and sit in with the group.
Yeah.
Well, there are group, and he's told me when the practices are.
Yeah.
So I will show up and I will practice, and there's things we have to practice together. I have to know how the piece goes and how my part fits in to everybody else's part because I have a role to play,
Yeah.
and I'm not the clarinet. And thank goodness I'm not the clarinet. I'm not the oboe. I'm not the violin. I'm the trumpet. I need to know what the trumpet player's role. But there's also things I have to do on my own. If I don't get my lip in shape, if I don't do those exercises, if I don't practice on
You
my
don't
own,
learn to count correctly.
now that you don't lose.
Well,
don't lose. And I don't even.
You
it's like
say that until you teach college kids for a living.
Yeah, that's a good.
You know,
point.
and
Yeah,
then
that's a
you
good
go,
point. Anything can be forgotten.
yes, it can be.
You could fall off a bike.
It can happen.
It can happen. So I think when we talk about virtuous community, one of the things that I think we want to do is we're rolling out these different practices. Is that we're going to look at them through the lens of what does it mean to be a member of a virtuous community, and then what does it mean to be a virtuous community, and they are very intertwined. It's very hard to nuance how those are different because even when it's not accurate to say that the practice of prayer, personal prayer, is a practice I do alone because every time I pray,
Someone prays with you.
someone is praying.
Yeah.
You never pray alone.
At least the third person of the Trinity.
Exactly.
If not, I did a gig Sunday. Grace Church of the Nazarene celebrated their 100th anniversary. And it was fun. They've got great history. There are things that you can't make up. They once had an evangelist, a Nazarene evangelist, whose name, he's from Alabama, and his name is H.H. Hooker. And the only more unfortunate name for a Nazarene evangelist I can think of is Reverend Tingle from South Carolina.
Wait, I'm going to keep hash marks
Yeah.
this season of things that we've decided not to bring up.
Not to
that-
bring
that
up, but
come
that's
anyway.
when they come up anyway.
One.
And but Grace Church is just got this great history. I can name the names, right?
That's
and then
right.
I can show you the pictures. It's not just the person who was, that you and I had in class. It's their parents. It's all these wonderful people, and you're sitting there in the midst of this celebration, and you just realize they're there with you.
That's right.
Their words are on the page.
And it's such a good point.
They're the whatever aesthetic, is
Yes.
that results from the practices woven together to make the life of worship of a church.
Because
They're in there.
every practice emerges from a tradition.
Yeah.
And it's not like progress.
No.
Not in the terms.
Well,
we've talked.
nor
And
is
we've
it the
talked
result
before.
of an equation.
No.
You know, that's one of the things about the Dykstra book that it's a part of, that by Nancy Murphy and Brad Kallenberg, Practices and Virtues, or Virtues and Practices in the Christian Tradition.
You can read it right there. You have the book on
thank
your
you.
lap.
Yes, Virtues and Practices.
And there's my copy of the book.
Virtues and Practices, I feel like I'm Vanna White.
Yeah.
Virtues, she's from the North Myrtle Beach United Methodist Church. Did you know that?
could I possibly-
William Williman was once her pastor. See,
Okay.
all the things you trust me to know. But in this book, one of the things that they make clear over and over again that's so helpful is that, this is not about, okay, here's the list of practices. You do these things
It's not
and
a
a
formula.
mechanism falls into place and a mathematical equation has been achieved and now we're somewhere. It's not that.
No.
It's an aesthetic. It's a tradition.
Yes.
And it's enjoying not only the fullness of it, for me,
Yes.
Sunday at Grace Church. Okay. I have been, interesting, right? My wife's grandparents went there. Okay.
Wow.
I have attended weddings and preached there 3 or 4 times, but I have friends, and yet we open our mouths to sing,
Yeah.
and the songs are songs we know by heart, and all of a sudden I'm a part of their tradition.
Yes.
And
It
they're
doesn't take much,
It
does
doesn't
it?
take much, and they're in my heart.
That's right.
You know.
And one of the things you say that I really like, one of the things you say that I really
Thank
like,
you.
out of the 7,
Out of the 7 that you
Yes,
actually
that's
like, thank you. At least you know how many there are.
Yeah.
Because there are some people who just don't even know. They just think it's a 2.
is that in Christianity, dead people get a vote.
Yep.
That we don't just remember them, and it's not just something that we've inherited, but we believe that we're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses who get a say in what we do because they have a stake in what we do. I like to call it the world's longest relay race,
Yeah.
where each generation passes on a baton and we inherit the baton. We run with care
Yes.
and pass the baton on, but the baton is what's been passed on all the way back.
All the way back.
All the way back.
And what's really interesting in the way that we sort of have to think about this in terms of virtues and telos and McIntyre is that what you're talking about is Christian worship.
That's exactly
See, that's
right.
what Christians call that.
That's exactly
We can inside of it, we can have fun with the metaphors.
Yes.
Let us set aside every encumbrance and run the race
That's
that
right.
lies before.
Yes.
There are several ways, but what it is this is the Christian practice of worship with certain notions and excellences and virtues constantly at play within it that are making us who we are. And we can say that several ways. We can say making us new. We can say redeeming us, but renewing us. And in that is this great dynamic called a tradition.
That's right.
Which
And-
is this is what we miss.
Yes, and it's not something we create. We don't create
No.
a virtuous community.
enjoy it.
We enter into it.
Yeah.
You don't get to create baseball. We don't get to have a generation that goes, well, that's the way they played baseball, but we want to play baseball this way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can make up a game.
We want to have 3 bases.
Yeah.
We want to have no home runs.
Yeah, we want to bring the fence in so that everybody gets to hit a home run.
Well-
always so that they can feel good about themselves. And the point is that you can make that up, but you can't call it baseball
No.
because it's a tradition. You enter into traditions. You don't make them.
That's right. And you are given a role.
That's right.
That's the neat
Yeah,
thing
we need to
about the
talk about
baseball,
roles. Yeah.
idea is that you're given a role. And, my role, I'm a historian in the household of God. I wanted the role of king, but it wasn't available. so I get
And you
stuck.
tried for years
years.
to
I mean, to walk around
lobby.
going, don't I look like
You don't vote for kings.
You don't vote on me. I'm your king. Wouldn't it be great? It's what the great Christian
Well, I
theologian
didn't vote
Tom,
for you.
the great Christian theologian Tom Petty said, "It's good to be king, no matter what it pays."
Yes.
But you're given a role, and in that role, right, you find the practice of joy.
Yes.
You also find practices that lead to the virtue of constancy,
Yes.
of simplicity. But the practices are these ways that the virtues are socially situated together. And it's a little bit logically messy, but it's wonderful when you think about it in terms of it being what it is.
See, and there's this in the book that you gave me
Thank you.
to read and required reading.
I'm hoping God
Yeah, so-
is keeping count as well.
No doubt, and you know the amount of required reading to do a podcast with you is
Is
in
it's
fact,
substantial.
I think
Just
people
why I
should
don't
just
do it with very many people.
exactly because I actually you know
You
me I'm
actually-
Nazarene enough you can guilt me into
That's
doing
right.
it, but in the chapter on practices he talks about. Dykstra talks about
Yeah.
entering into practice, and he has this beautiful thing. If you don't mind, I'd like to walk
No,
through it real quickly.
do,
But he
do,
talks about
do.
the in the level one, you engage in the practice. But there's a deeper level. You engage in the practice with others. And what you'll find is if you engage in the practice with others, there's a deeper level where you begin to find them to be significant others. Important distinction.
Right.
We don't practice with significant others. We practice with others and they become
Significant others.
significant.
And we find out that the significant others
There's
recognize.
3 more levels.
Yeah, there's 3 more. Keep going. That they're masters.
That's it. And level 4, the deeper level, as we practice with these people who have become significant to us, we find out that we share in common good work,
Yeah.
which fits really nicely with Hauerwas's definition of what friendship is. I was thinking about
right.
you this week because I was on that thing. Our friendship exists in common good work
That's what it is.
that we could not do without each other.
Can't
to
do it
some
without
degree.
each other. It's fun.
And then what happens is we find that as it becomes our good work, those practices become second nature. And then the deepest level then is we feel the need to initiate others into those practices.
Well, and so, you know, one of the things we're going to talk about in this season is how all of that happens, and it's happening almost at the same time.
That's exactly
You know,
right.
because you're being initiated in, and you don't realize.
It's not levels as in a
Yeah, right,
progression.
right.
It's these things are all happening.
But they're all happening. But then they're all happening in terms of the specificity of the practices that make up the Christian tradition. So there's the practice of worship. There's the practice of discipleship. There's the practice of witnessing. There's the practice of mercy. And I'm leaving out the 5th one.
There was only 4,
There was only 4. Okay.
which is why you're
leaving out the 5th one. That's good. Well, I'm getting older.
Yeah, no, that's
It's-
good. Well, we had a list of 20.
Yeah.
And so those were the group. What we said
Those are the
on the
group-
group ones
yeah.
did the worship, witness, mercy, and
Discipleship.
discipleship.
Yeah.
And then we said on the individual practices, we're going to talk about praying. I'm gonna make sure I'm looking at my list. Praying, the reading,
Reading,
resting,
resting,
and work.
work.
And that these individual / group and the line between them and the distinction between them is so blurred.
Yeah.
Are what help us both participate in a virtuous community and be a virtuous community. And it is not something we create, but that
No.
we move into. And like you said, we learn to enjoy. Now, I got to tell you, I struggled for years in conversations we had that worship would be enough. And I remember talking to you time
Oh,
and
yeah.
again
I know.
as I struggled to try to figure out how to be one person. Because, you know, the roles thing messed me up bad.
Yeah, I know.
Because I thought I had to be this person to be successful here, this. And I was trying to live all of those roles without allowing the meta-narrative to be the meta-narrative. And you just kept saying it's worship.
Yeah.
It's prayer, it's scripture, it's preaching, it's
And
the sacraments.
It is.
And,
it's
the
you.
sacraments. And the
and
sacraments.
you
and
are
sacraments.
always you.
And you are always you. And that search to become one person. And I was like, it just can't be enough. It can't be enough. And you would give me these books. I'm like, they're just telling me the same thing. They're saying worship. Tell me,
that's because
how am I
it's
supposed
true.
to live in worship 24/7? And then I learned that it's true. The illustration I like to use, it's like these astronauts that do the spacewalk, and they have to be tethered.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
You know what I mean? It's like they
Yeah.
leave and you see the tether.
Well-
and it's become that has become my visual when I walk out the door, when I walk into the classroom, when I walk into this podcast, when I walk into the sanctuary, when I come home to be with my wife, there's this tether running, a tether of worship. Worship tethers me
It does.
to my God.
because in that, and this is kind of the way Christians think about time. In that is memory.
Oh, that's good.
Well, but think about it. We know the creation story. Who gave us that memory? Look at me. I can remember my future.
Yeah.
I'm going to get there one day. And when I get there, my past is going to be waiting with nail-pierced hands.
Yeah.
You know, and you know that tether, but it's not memory like something past.
Yes.
It's this dynamic of knowledge that is imparted to me by God as a part of the practice of worship. And when that happens, I remember me, but I'm also becoming a better version of me, a version, you know, that's being perfected, more driven toward the great telos of God, you know. And when you have that in your life, you know, I tell my kids all the time, they go, oh, you know, got seniors. Well, you know, I'm getting offers. I go, yeah. They go, what's a, you know, where should I go? What's a good job? And I go, well, I'd find a town with a good church. And they just look at me and they go, well, don't you want dynamic, you know, money, places to live, affordable housing, you know, fresh air, you know, good food. Yeah, all that's important, but the thing that's necessary to live life as a practicing Christian, vital tradition, speaking and learning the depth of the language, is a good church. And I say, look, if you can find a place to go work, you can find a place to go flourish, to raise your kids, and there's a good church. Run, don't walk, and hang on for dear life.
That's right.
You know?
And in the same way, we don't create virtuous communities, we enter into them. We don't create good churches, we enter into those. And an entire church can enter into being a virtuous community together.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
That's us. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun season 4.
It's going to be a good one.
All right, good, cool.
This is The Good Life is produced by Nathaniel Jackson and is a ministry of Hermitage Church of the Nazarene. Visit hermitagechurch.org for more information about this podcast, as well as our other podcasts, all of which are a way that we're making Christ-like disciples in the nations. Thanks for joining us, and have a blessed day.